Hi, I'm Natalie from Hack Manufacturing, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you about my freelancing experience. This is the second video of my three-part work-focused vlog. The first video is a walkthrough of my CV and my corporate experience, and the third video is about my experience in launching a new product. Links in the description below. Firstly, I'll give you a bit of a backstory about my life before finishing employment. Then I'll spend most of my time in this video talking about 2020, everyone's favourite year. I did a few projects in 2021, which I'll cover at the end. But as that year went on, I ended up jumping in both feet into developing a new product. So the backstory. In 2013, my mum was diagnosed with breast cancer and she had steadily been declining over the years. We knew 2020 was really going to be her final chapter. So before anything hit the fan, I wanted to have a career break. My mental state over the years was save money, go traveling, learn about passive income, and give freelancing a go. Maybe after that, come back to corporate work, depending on how it all panned out. In November 2019, Mum was given a 12-month warning to get her affairs in order. So I was pretty keen to get traveling at that point. I handed in my notice at the end of November and finished my employment in December 2019. So for me, 2020 was the most chaotic year ever. Considering we were all locked down for most of that year, I ended up moving around a lot. For the first quarter, I was in Thailand on my career break. Then halfway through March, the FCO obviously called for all travellers to come back to the UK. And so most of the second quarter, I lived in Airbnbs because I had rented my flat out and both my parents were vulnerable. In quarter three, my mum took a nosedive with her health, so I isolated at her house in London and cared for her until she passed away on the 27th of September. In quarter four, I carried on living at mum's through October, and then I finally moved back to Brighton and Hove in November 2020. So, first quarter, I landed in Thailand on the 6th of January 2020, and I took a month off just to travel, relax, have some fun, and set up my company. My previous employer offered me some freelancing work to sort out some drawings for them. So in January, I started my first company, Dead Cherry Design, and got all the businessy stuff moving. In February, I really started to look into Amazon and what it was all about. Amazon was always very interesting to me because my career is focused around creating physical products. And so I have a reasonable idea about supply chain. I traveled around to different markets to find something practical for Amazon FBA. So a good chunk of my time was spent getting in with suppliers and doing cost studies. I discovered how complicated sea freighting was. Once I looked at the paperwork, I realised I needed to hire a broker if I wanted to get anything back to the UK. But the world had shut down at that point and all business had completely stopped. I ended up accounting for air freighting and gave up on the idea of making any profit. So after analysing many products, I ended up with earrings, keyrings and harem pants, just some cheap stuff to get a feel for the system. I spent lots of time learning about the way Amazon handles branding. I battled Amazon customer services with the inventory spreadsheets, and I went down a rabbit hole to get those crispy white Amazon thumbnail pictures. When the FCO decided to call all travellers back in March, I spent the best part of 2 weeks under the Thai curfew on the phone, freaking out at the insurers, hunting for Airbnbs and scratching around for flights because all airlines were told to ground their aircraft. I ended up getting a £1,000 flight back to London with Thai Airways, which I didn't get back from the insurers, and we left the tarmac 30 minutes early. So I landed in the UK on the 28th of March. Moving into the second quarter, I was living in Airbnbs, which was quite fun. I ended up with some amazing deals because there were obviously no sales at all, and all of the hosts just needed someone to cover their mortgage costs. I scrapped the Amazon thing completely because supply and shipping just was not happening. So as we were hunkered down for the foreseeable future, I started fixing my portfolio and my website for freelancing. I became engrossed with the business groups on Facebook because you need to have an online presence, and this was a complete mystery to me. The content in these groups were basically the things that an engineer would never touch with a barge pole, like social media skills, content writing, marketing strategies, and developing your core story, which is definitely something I really struggled with. All of this stuff really highlighted the holes in my skills. I didn't realise how bad my English skills had deteriorated since becoming an engineer, as in reading, writing and speaking skills. I didn't have to do any of that English stuff as a design engineer. It's mostly 3D design and a lot of email pushing. I had this vision of me doing a blog when I started the website, but after struggling with my core story, I realized that writing isn't really for me. So I replaced the blog with reverse engineering of things from around the house, like say a toothbrush cover. I'd sketch it, measure it up, and then transpose it onto SolidWorks just to beef my website up a bit. I also started to understand about how important personal branding was. There were marketing experts in these groups that were diagnosing websites, and there were also copywriters that would just review your work too. Whilst all that website development was going on, I joined a scheme called the New Enterprise Allowance. This was a government-funded scheme to help startups get on their feet, where you get a financial help and a business coach. To get onto the scheme, I developed a business proposal and calculated my sales projections for the coming years. It's funny looking back at it at this point. Everyone thought that COVID was just going to blow over. Anyways, this is when I started to regret calling myself Dead Cherry Design. My name was aimed at industries that were a little bit more fun, like toys or gadgets, but it was really a bad time to go after a new industry. The only proof of work that I had in the current climate, as in where I actually had people asking me to make stuff, was for the medical industry. My name wasn't exactly suitable for the medical industry, but onwards and upwards, I made my projections for the business proposal based on medical engineering. But then towards the end of June, I landed a freelancing gig with an entrepreneur who wanted to launch a toy. So it was a bit messy that I did the proposal for the medical and ended up with a toy. So this project was a concept development and visualization. It wasn't a design for manufacture job. It was me advising what can and can't be achieved in terms of plastic and creating a model on CAD, which would be a good representation of the toy itself. And so we went from a handmade model to a potential design. Once we got the concept down, we got some marketing pictures done with renders of the project placed on stock images of kids playing with it. And that pretty much wraps it up for the second quarter. So moving into the third quarter, which was the messiest part of 2020 for me, I managed to move back into my flat in Brighton and Hove for a couple of weeks, but then Mum took a nosedive with her health. So I moved to London to look after her and my brother. I was still keen to keep up my SolidWorks skills, but I didn't want to be contractually tied to a project. If something happened to Mum, I would just have to drop everything and potentially not pick it back up for a few weeks. So I started doing competitions where the payments were retrospective. I wasn't tied into an hourly contract. It was a cash prize after the work was complete. Another major advantage of these competitions was that many of them were open book. So all of the designers who were entering the competition could see each other's work, and some were public too, which meant that I could use it on my website even if I didn't win. So it was kind of nice. I could show more projects on my website, I keep my SolidWorks skills up, and it gave me a bit of an achievement boost while I was caring for Mum in the middle of lockdown. The first project was a slow feeder dog bowl, which is a bowl that has crevasses in there where you put the food and it stops the dog from eating it too quickly. I got samples in and did 9 designs of injection molded dog bowls with rubber overmold. That was a design for manufacture, and I also did a walkthrough proposal document of how it would be made. I did a soap scrubber, which was a design for manufacture also, which was 3 single cavity injection molded parts where one of them would have been overmolded too. I also got to play around with rendering on SolidWorks PhotoView 360 as I had just upgraded to the SolidWorks Pro license. I did some random SolidWorks courses just for a laugh too. As Mum's health deteriorated throughout the summer, I gave up doing design because caring was just too full on. Then Mum passed away at the end of the quarter. I stayed in London for October to sort out the funeral, and that month was pretty much a write-off for me. Then at the end of November, I moved back to Brighton and Hove, which is where I am now. As soon as I moved back, a friend of a friend approached me to develop his magic trick, which was ideal because it was a product prototype development, which is exactly where my experience is. It was going to be an injection molded thin wall section product with springs and clips. I couldn't have asked for anything better because when I was in that sluggish, griefy state of mind, I only really wanted to do what I was already good at. And for me, that's prototyping. In December, I joined a co-working space called Plus X because they had an amazing workshop with loads of 3D printers, and I needed a physical routine of getting out of the house. So I was quite well set up at the end of the year, despite the coronavirus and Mum. I had a purely mechanical product to deal with. I didn't have to learn anything new. I didn't have to show up socially and be all bright and happy for clients. I could just hide away in the workshop and experiment with prototypes. We did 3 rounds of prototyping with the resin printer, then we sent it out to tender. We had injection molders from China, India, and we even asked one from the UK, which is quite surprising because tool making in the UK is kind of a dying trade. Towards the end of December, I concluded that Dead Cherry design just wasn't working for me and I needed to rebrand. Now I'd gotten stuck in and dealt with a few projects, I had a much better idea of my market. I spent quite a few days looking at domain names and hackmanufacturing.com was available, so I went straight for hack because it seemed kind of punchy. So I built a new website over Christmas and that took me all the way into January of 2021. As I spent most of 2021 working on my own products, I only had a few freelancing gigs. This is just a very high overview of them. At the beginning of the year, I landed a job on Upwork and it was an injection molded washroom product. The client had already had his design brief down and was technically competent. This job was mainly concept development on how the parts would fit together and some guidance on sealing. I did the design on SolidWorks to adapt various shapes and sizes, and I also did a bit of prototyping to test some ideas. The client also wanted me to sort out the patent application too, which looked like writing out the wording and doing the technical drawings for it. Next one was a personal project. I used to be a skater and a part of a skate group here in Brighton. They go around town blasting out music with these backpack speakers called ASBoxes. My friends have spent years developing these speakers and they mostly use wood to construct it, which I found quite heavy to skate with. I had access to a vacuum former in the workshop, so I wanted to experiment with making the speaker's shell out of ABS. I reverse engineered the speaker and started to redesign the shell on SolidWorks. But then I didn't get a chance to finish it because I was landing so many little random jobs. I ended up working on a weatherproof box of tricks for a company on the floor above me. I created a candle holder, I made a throttle cap for an e-scooter, and I picked up the magic trick again. After those little projects finished, I started to really get into my new product. So I didn't pick anything up for a while. But at the end of the third quarter, I picked up a freelancing gig, which was to do with a type of desk. This was like a soldering desk, but better. And my job was making CAD models for a marketing company to do the 3D renders of it. I knew the metalworkers who were going to manufacture it, so we met up and roughly worked through the concept together. I did the CAD work to get the design mostly there. Then I handed it off to the client and the rendering company and the metalworkers. So that's it for 2021 in terms of freelancing. In the next video, I'll be digging down into my product and how that all fell out. Thank you so much for listening and I hope it was informative for you. I've really enjoyed doing this video because honestly, when I looked back at 2020, it felt like I did nothing but waste away. Now that I've finally done this vlog, I can see that I did actually do something. Absolutely rubbish time to leave employment, right? Anyways, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this and I hope to see you again soon.